The ships appeared in Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning. They were massive, gleaming white vessels that reflected the sun like polished mirrors. Within hours, every government on Earth knew humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the International Space Station, watching the alien fleet position themselves in perfect formation. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, her breath catching in her throat. 23 alien ships hung in the darkness of space, each one larger than any building she had ever seen. "They're requesting communication," someone said behind her. Sarah turned to see Commander Marcus Webb entering the deck. His military uniform was crisp, but his face showed the same wonder she felt. "How long until they respond?" Sarah asked. "They already did. They speak English, and Chinese, and Arabic, and apparently every other language we have." Marcus shook his head slowly. "They've been watching us for a while." The first meeting happened 3 days later. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Concordance, a federation of 47 different species spread across thousands of worlds. They sent a delegation to meet with human leaders at the newly expanded space station. Ambassador Velthar was the first alien Sarah met in person. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with skin that shimmered between blue and purple. His eyes were large and kind, and when he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that made Sarah think of wind chimes. "Humanity," Velthar said, addressing the gathered humans, "you have reached the stars. This is a moment of great joy for the Concordance. We welcome you as our newest protected species." Sarah noticed the word immediately. Protected. Not equals, not partners. Protected. Marcus must have noticed too because he leaned forward slightly. "Protected from what?" Velthar's expression shifted into what might have been a smile. "From the dangers of the galaxy, Commander Webb. Space is vast and often hostile. Many young species do not survive their first century among the stars. But you need not worry. The Concordance has kept peace for 3,000 years. Over the next few weeks, more aliens arrived. Sarah met scholars, scientists, and military officers from dozens of species. They were all polite, all curious about humanity, and all seemed to view humans with a kind of gentle amusement. "Your chemical rockets are quite clever," one alien scientist told Sarah, examining a model of Earth's latest spacecraft. "Very resourceful for such limited technology." Sarah tried not to feel insulted. "We've made significant progress in the last century." "Oh yes, of course." The alien's enthusiasm seemed genuine. "It reminds us of our own early days. You'll grow so much with our help." The help came in the form of a gift. On the 4th week after first contact, Velthar called a special gathering. Every major human leader attended, either in person or via video link. Sarah and Marcus were there representing Earth's scientific and military communities. "The Concordance has decided," Velthar announced, "to share with humanity one of our most important technologies. We give you the gift of shield technology." Holographic displays filled the room, showing swirling energy fields and complex mathematical formulas. Sarah leaned forward, her scientific mind racing to understand what she was seeing. "These shields," Velthar continued, "have protected Concordance worlds for millennia. They can deflect kinetic impacts, absorb radiation, and neutralize energy weapons. With these shields, Earth and all your colonies will be safe from any threat." The room erupted in amazed chatter. Sarah watched the data streams, her mind working through the implications. The technology was incredible, far beyond anything humans had developed. The shields created a harmonic energy field that could phase shift incoming matter and energy, redirecting it harmlessly away. "This is remarkable," Sarah said, standing. "Ambassador, I have questions about the power requirements and the field harmonics." "All will be explained, Dr. Chen," Velthar assured her with that gentle, almost patronizing smile. "Our engineers will help your people understand." Marcus spoke up from his seat. "What are the shield's limitations?" The room went quiet. Velthar tilted his head, a gesture Sarah had learned meant confusion. "Limitations? Every defensive system has weaknesses," Marcus said calmly. "What can penetrate these shields?" "Nothing, Commander." Velthar's voice carried absolute confidence. "In 3,000 years, no weapon has ever breached Concordance shield technology. You are asking about a problem that does not exist." Sarah saw Marcus's jaw tighten slightly, but he said nothing more. The installation began within a month. Alien engineers arrived with massive generator systems, working alongside human technicians to build shield arrays around Earth, Luna, Mars, and the outer colonies. Sarah spent 16-hour days studying the technology, trying to understand every aspect of how it worked. The other human scientists were thrilled, eager to learn, but Sarah kept finding herself asking questions that made the alien engineers uncomfortable. What happens if the harmonic frequency is disrupted? She asked one day. The alien engineer, a small creature with 6 arms and crystal-like skin, made a chirping sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. The frequency cannot be disrupted. It is mathematically perfect. But theoretically, Dr. Chen, with respect, your species is very young. You think in terms of problems because you have known many problems. The concordance has solved these issues long ago. Trust in the technology. Sarah wanted to argue, but she held her tongue. She made notes instead, filling datapad after datapad with observations and theoretical concerns. Marcus had his own concerns. He spent his time studying concordance military vessels and tactics. What he found troubled him. Every single ship in the concordance fleet relied entirely on shields for defense. Their hulls were thin, barely more than frameworks to hold equipment. Their weapons were energy-based, designed to overwhelm other shields through brute force. They've forgotten how to fight, Marcus told Sarah one evening in the space station's observation lounge. Earth hung below them, now surrounded by a faint shimmer where the new shields protected the planet. What do you mean? Sarah asked, sipping coffee from a magnetic cup. Look at their ships. No armor, no redundant systems, no kinetic weapons. Everything depends on those shields. Marcus gestured at the alien vessels visible in the distance. If the shields fail, they have nothing. The shields won't fail, Sarah said, but even as she spoke, doubt crept into her voice. At least that's what they keep telling me. That's what worries me. Marcus stared out at the stars. I tried running combat simulations with them. They were confused by the concept. They don't simulate shield failures because shields don't fail. They don't practice evasive maneuvers because shields make evasion unnecessary. 3,000 years of peace has made them soft. Sarah thought about the mathematical formulas she had been studying. The shields were brilliant, elegant, perfect. But perfection made her nervous. In science, nothing was ever truly perfect. There were always variables, always unknowns. I'm going to keep testing, she said quietly. I need to understand the limitations, even if they insist there aren't any. Marcus nodded. And I'm going to make sure Earth defense keeps training the old way. Just in case. Just in case of what? Marcus looked at her, his expression serious. Just in case the impossible happens. Above them, alien ships glided through space, their shields glowing faintly in the starlight. Below them, Earth sparkled behind its new protective barrier. Everything seemed peaceful and safe. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just become dependent on technology they didn't fully understand, given to them by aliens who had forgotten what it meant to struggle. 6 months passed since the shields went online. Earth had changed in ways both visible and invisible. The shimmer of the planetary shield could sometimes be seen at night, a faint aurora that wrapped around the entire world. The colonies on Luna and Mars reported feeling safer than ever before. Trade with the concordance had begun, and alien goods were becoming common in major cities. Sarah Chen had spent those 6 months testing the shields in every way she could imagine. She fired projectiles at test shields, bombarded them with radiation, hit them with lasers and particle beams. Every test confirmed what the aliens had promised. The shields were perfect. They never failed. That was exactly what worried her. She stood in her laboratory on the space station, reviewing data from her latest experiment. The screen showed thousands of test results, all successful. Behind her, the door hissed open. Still looking for problems that don't exist? The voice belonged to Velthar. The ambassador visited Sarah's lab frequently, fascinated by her persistence. I'm looking for understanding, Sarah replied without turning around. There's a difference. Velthar moved beside her, his tall frame making her feel small. You have been testing for half a year, Dr. Chen. What more do you need to learn? Sarah pulled up a new display. I understand how the shields work. They create a harmonic frequency field that phase shifts incoming matter and energy. It's brilliant. But I want to present something to the Science Council. Oh? Velthar's voice carried interest and amusement. What would you teach the Council? Theoretical vulnerabilities. Sarah brought up a series of calculations. If someone could generate a counter-harmonic frequency, they could potentially nullify the shield's effectiveness. The math is complex, but it's possible, Velthar was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, a sound like distant bells. Dr. Chen, you honor us with your diligence. But you must understand the Science Council has explored every possibility over 3,000 years. What you call a vulnerability was considered and dismissed long ago. No one has ever generated a successful counter-harmonic. But theoretically, theory is merely thought exercise when proven impossible in practice. Velthar placed a long-fingered hand on her shoulder. A gesture of kindness. Your species is young. You see problems everywhere because survival has required constant vigilance. But you are safe now. You can rest. Sarah felt frustration rise in her chest, but she swallowed it down. I'd still like to present to the council. Of course, Velthar agreed easily. We welcome all scientific inquiry. The presentation to the Concordant Science Council happened 2 weeks later. Sarah stood before a gathered assembly of the galaxy's greatest minds. Representing dozens of species, she presented her findings clearly, showing mathematical models of potential shield failures and theoretical attack vectors. The council listened politely. When she finished, the head counselor, an ancient being whose species Sarah couldn't identify, spoke in a voice like grinding stones. Your work is thorough, Dr. Chen, but it addresses impossibilities. The counter-harmonic frequency you describe would require energy levels that would destroy any ship attempting to generate them. The phase variance you mention has never been observed in nature or laboratory. These are not vulnerabilities. They are mathematical curiosities. Other council members nodded agreement. One spoke up, a creature with multiple heads. Your concern is understandable for a young species, but trust in 3 millennia of proven success. The shields are absolute. Sarah left the council chambers feeling dismissed like a child who had been patted on the head and sent away. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb was having his own frustrations. Earth Defense Force continued training with traditional weapons and tactics, much to the confusion of Concordance military observers. Admiral Craven, a warrior from the Jakar species who looked like an upright lizard covered in armored scales, watched human training exercises with visible bewilderment. Explain this again, Craven said, watching human Marines practice boarding maneuvers. Why did they train for ship-to-ship combat? The shields prevent boarding actions. Unless the shields fail, Marcus replied. The shields do not fail. Humor me. Marcus pulled up a tactical display. Our doctrine assumes every system can fail. Shields, weapons, engines, life support. We train for worst-case scenarios. Craven made a hissing sound that might have been laughter. Worst-case thinking is admirable but wasteful. Why prepare for events that will never occur? Marcus organized a joint military exercise between Earth Defense and Concordance forces. It was meant to be a simple war game, a simulated defense of a colony world. Human ships took position on one side, Concordance vessels on the other. The exercise began. Human forces immediately launched electronic warfare, jamming communications and sensor systems. They deployed decoys and sent fighters on multiple attack vectors. They used the nearby asteroid field for cover, popping in and out of sight. Marcus's flagship coordinated a complex assault pattern that came from 3 directions at once. The Concordance forces simply sat behind their shields and waited for the humans to exhaust themselves. After 2 hours, Marcus called an end to the exercise. The Concordance had technically won by surviving every human attack. But as both sides met to discuss the results, the differences in philosophy became painfully clear. Your tactics are unnecessarily complex, one Concordance officer said, not unkindly. Why employ such elaborate maneuvers when shields make them irrelevant? Because shields can fail, Marcus repeated for what felt like the 100th time. Then what? The Concordance officers looked at each other in confusion. One finally spoke. If shields fail, the battle is lost. Why prepare for defeat? Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. You have no backup plans? No fallback tactics? Commander Webb, with respect. Backup plans are needed only when primary systems are unreliable. Our shields have never failed in recorded history. Planning for their failure would be like planning for gravity to reverse itself. After the meeting, Admiral Craven approached Marcus privately. The large alien was quiet for a moment before speaking. Your question troubles me. Which question? Then what? Craven's eyes, golden and slitted like a snake's, studied Marcus carefully. I have been a warrior for 60 years. I have fought in a dozen campaigns, but always behind shields. I realize today that I do not know how to fight without them. Marcus felt a spark of respect for the alien admiral. That's a dangerous position. Perhaps. Craven looked out at the stars through the station's viewport. But what danger exists that could threaten concordance shields? In 3,000 years, Commander, no enemy has found a way. Perhaps your human caution is simply unnecessary. But even as Craven spoke, reports were filtering in from the outer rim territories. Ships were disappearing. At first it seemed like simple navigation errors. Space was vast and ships did occasionally get lost. But Sarah noticed a pattern when she reviewed the incident reports. "Look at this," she told Marcus one evening, pulling up a star map in her quarters. Red dots marked disappearance locations. 17 ships in 6 months, all along the rim, all carrying the latest shield technology. Pirates? Marcus suggested. That's what the Concordance thinks. But look closer. Sarah zoomed in on the data. No distress calls. No debris fields. No evidence of combat. These ships just vanished. Their shields were operational one moment, then complete silence. Could be a lot of things. Or one specific thing. Sarah pulled up her old calculations, the ones the Science Council had dismissed. What if someone figured out how to neutralize the shields? What if all these ships lost their protection at once? Marcus leaned back, thinking. The Concordance would never believe it. I know. I already tried reporting my theory. They say I'm seeing patterns where none exist. Sarah closed the displays, frustration evident on her face. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Paranoia has kept humanity alive more than once, Marcus said quietly. He stood and moved to the viewport, looking out at the protected Earth below. I'm going to keep training Earth defense the old way. Heavy armor, kinetic weapons, redundant systems. If the Concordance thinks we're primitive, let them. And I'll keep looking for the shield's breaking point, Sarah added, even if no one wants me to find it. Neither of them knew that their caution would soon become humanity's greatest advantage. Far beyond the outer rim, in a region of space the Concordance had never explored, an empire was preparing. They had studied Concordance technology for decades, watching and learning. They had found what Sarah suspected existed, the impossible solution, the counter to shields that supposedly had no counter. The Zarathian Dominion was coming, and they knew exactly how to turn the Concordance's greatest strength into its ultimate weakness. The attacks came without warning on a day that started like any other. Sarah was in her laboratory analyzing mineral samples from a Concordance mining world when every alarm in the station began screaming at once. "This is not a drill," a voice announced over the station's speakers. "All personnel to emergency stations. We are receiving distress calls from multiple Concordance worlds." Sarah ran to the command center, her heart pounding. The room was chaos with dozens of people shouting over each other. Marcus was already there, his face grim as he studied the tactical displays. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, pushing through the crowd to reach him. 3 core worlds under attack, Marcus said without looking away from the screens. New Kython, Velthar Prime, and Korath Station. All simultaneous strikes. Who's attacking? No one knows. The species isn't in any Concordance database. Marcus pulled up a grainy image of a ship. It was dark and angular, covered in strange symbols. They're calling themselves the Zarathian Dominion. Sarah watched the tactical feed in horror. Red icons representing Concordance defense fleets blinked out one after another, disappearing from the display as ships were destroyed. How are they losing so fast? The shields aren't working, Marcus interrupted quietly. Whatever weapons these Zarathians are using, they're going right through the shields like they're not even there. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. That's impossible. The Council said. The Council was wrong. Marcus finally turned to look at her and she saw fear in his eyes. Fear and something else. Vindication that he had been right to worry. Every single Concordance vessel that engaged the enemy has been destroyed. Their shields activate, the Zarathian weapons fire, and the shields just stop working. On the main display, they watched live footage from New Kython, the planet's orbital defense platforms, each protected by massive shield arrays, were firing desperately at the approaching enemy fleet. The Zarathian ships didn't even slow down. They fired strange, pulsing weapons that seemed to ripple through space itself. When the pulses hit the Concordance shields, the shields flickered once and vanished. Without shields, the defense platforms were helpless. Their thin hulls crumpled under return fire. Within minutes, the entire orbital defense network was debris. They're targeting the planet now, someone said, their voice shaking. But the Zarathians didn't destroy the planet. Instead, they sent down landing craft, beginning a methodical invasion. It was clear they weren't here just to destroy. They were here to conquer. Over the next 48 hours, the situation spiraled from bad to catastrophic. The Zerathian Dominion struck 6 more worlds, each attack following the same pattern. Their ships appeared, disabled all shields within range, and crushed any resistance. Concordance forces that had known nothing but victory for 3,000 years were being swept aside like children. Emergency sessions of the Concordance Council were held continuously. Sarah and Marcus attended as Earth's representatives, watching as alien leaders who had seemed so confident now struggled with panic. "We need to understand their technology," one counselor insisted. "How are they neutralizing our shields?" Sarah had reviewed every scrap of sensor data from the attacks. She stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. "I can tell you how. They're using the counterharmonic frequency I warned about 6 months ago." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to her. "It's a specific resonance pattern," Sarah continued, pulling up her old calculations on the main display. "When their weapons hit your shields, they generate a frequency that's the exact opposite of your shield harmonics. The fields cancel each other out. Your shields don't fail. They're being actively negated." "But the energy requirements," the head counselor protested weakly. "You said yourself it would destroy any ship attempting it." "I was wrong about that part," Sarah admitted. "Or maybe they found a way around it. But I was right about the vulnerability existing." The counselor looked old suddenly, ancient and tired. "What do we do?" "Fight without shields," Marcus said, standing beside Sarah. "Reform your tactics. Use armor. Use cover. Fight the way species fought before shields existed." "We don't know how," Admiral Craven said, and there was no shame in his admission, only brutal honesty. 3,000 years, Commander. Entire generations have lived and died knowing only shield-based warfare. Our ships are built around shields. Our weapons are designed to overwhelm shields. Our tactics assume shields will protect us. Without them, we are defenseless." The room erupted in argument. Some counselors insisted they could develop new shields. Others wanted to sue for peace. A few suggested retreating to inner territories and abandoning the outer rim. Marcus waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "With respect, counselors, you're wasting time you don't have. While you debate, the Zerathians are advancing. At their current pace, they'll reach Concordance core space within a month. What would you have us do?" Velthar asked. Sarah's friend looked haggard, aged by stress. His homeworld of Velthar Prime was under siege, his family trapped on the surface. Marcus looked at Sarah. She nodded. Together, they had discussed this possibility during countless late-night conversations over the past months. "Request Earth's military assistance," Marcus said. "We'll help." The room exploded in confused chatter. One counselor, a floating gas being whose translator gave its voice a hollow quality, spoke over the others. "With respect, humans, your military is limited. You have barely 100 ships capable of leaving your solar system. Against the Zerathian fleet, you would be destroyed in minutes." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But we have something you don't. We know how to fight without shields." Over the next week, distress calls flooded in from across Concordance space. World after world fell to the Zerathian advance. The Dominion was methodical and ruthless, having clearly planned this invasion for years. Perhaps decades. Velthar arrived at Earth's space station personally, his diplomatic ship one of the few Concordance vessels that had successfully fled the battle zones. He met with Sarah and Marcus in private. "My world," Velthar said quietly, "is being evacuated. Billions of people being loaded onto transports, fleeing their own home because we cannot protect them. The Great Concordance, which has kept peace for millennia, is falling apart in a matter of days." "It's not over," Sarah said, though she felt the weight of her words. "We can still fight back." "With what?" Velthar looked at them both, his eyes damp with emotion. "The Council debates and argues while worlds burn. Some call for surrender. Others want to hide behind our inner defenses and hope the Zerathians stop advancing. No one has a real solution." "We do," Marcus said firmly. "But the Council has to be willing to admit that humanity's primitive ways might actually work." Velthar was quiet for a long moment. Finally he asked, "What do you need?" "Tactical command of the defense of Velthar Prime," Marcus said. "And permission to fight our way." "Earth Defense Force has already voted to commit our fleets," Sarah added. "We're coming to help whether the Council approves or not, but we'll be more effective with official support." Velthar stood, straightening his shoulders. For the first time since arriving, He looked like the confident ambassador Sarah had first met. "I will make the council see reason, and if they will not," he paused, "then I will defy them. My world will not fall while allies offer their help." True to his word, Velthar returned to the council chambers. Whatever he said in that session remained private, but the result was clear. The Concordance officially requested Earth's military assistance. Earth Defense Force mobilized within hours. Every combat-capable ship was prepared for deployment. They were old ships by Concordance standards, built with thick armor plating instead of relying on shields. They carried kinetic weapons, missiles, and railguns instead of energy weapons. They looked primitive next to sleek Concordance vessels. But they had one critical advantage. They were designed to fight and survive without shields. Sarah worked frantically in her lab, trying to modify shield technology to resist the counter-harmonic weapons. She made progress, developing a rapidly shifting frequency pattern that might work, but testing would have to happen in combat. There was no time for proper trials. As the Earth fleet prepared to depart, Marcus found Sarah on the observation deck. Together they watched the ships forming up in space. Each one carried the flag of Earth, a blue and green marble on a field of black. "Think we can actually do this?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he said, "The Concordance thought their shields made them invincible. They forgot that nothing is truly invincible. We never had that luxury. We've always known we could lose, so we learned how to fight anyway. That's not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true." Marcus turned to face her. "We're going into battle against an enemy that just destroyed the most powerful military in the galaxy. We're probably going to take casualties. Some of us might not come back, then why go?" Marcus smiled, and there was something fierce in it, because they asked for help. And because we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. He looked back at the fleet. Besides, the Zerathians planned this whole invasion around one assumption, that everyone fights like the Concordance. They're about to learn that humans are different. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velthar system and immediately went to full battle stations. Marcus stood on the bridge of the EDF Defiance, his flagship, studying the tactical display. What he saw made his jaw tighten. Velthar Prime was surrounded by Zerathian ships. The planet's orbital defense network was completely destroyed. Debris fields marking where proud stations once stood. On the surface, cities burned. Refugee transports were desperately trying to escape, but Zerathian fighters hunted them down one by one. "Enemy fleet composition?" Marcus asked calmly. "Counting 47 capital ships over 200 smaller vessels," his tactical officer reported. "They outnumber us 3-1. "Good," Marcus said, surprising everyone on the bridge. "If they were smart, they'd have sent more." He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Webb, remember your training. We're not here to look pretty or rely on magic shields. We're here to fight. Armor up, load all tubes, and prepare for evasive maneuvers. Let's show them how Earth does things." The human fleet didn't charge in gloriously. Instead, they split into 3 groups, each one taking a different approach vector. Marcus's group went high, using the system's asteroid belt for cover. Another group swung low, using Velthar Prime's moon as a shield. The third circled wide, coming in from the system's edge. The Zerathians noticed them immediately. A portion of their fleet broke off to intercept, confident in their ability to disable any shields and destroy any opposition. They fired their counter-harmonic weapons at maximum range. The familiar pulse waves spread out, hitting the human ships. Nothing happened. On the bridge of the Defiance, Marcus smiled grimly. "That's what I thought. They're so used to their weapon working that they forgot to check if we even have shields to disable. Some of our ships have shields," the tactical officer noted. "And those shields are using Dr. Chen's frequency shifting pattern. Even if the Zerathians hit the right frequency, it'll have shifted by the time they fire again." Marcus leaned forward. "All ships, weapons free. Let them have it." The human fleet opened fire with weapons the Concordance had considered primitive. Railguns launched solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missile pods fired swarms of self-guided warheads. Point defense lasers created deadly grids of crossfire. The Zerathian ships tried to evade, but they were used to enemies hiding behind shields, not aggressively closing distance. The human ships didn't slow down. They accelerated into range, their thick armor meant to take hits and keep fighting. One Zerathian destroyer took a railgun slug directly to its main hull. The kinetic impact tore through its structure, breaking the ship in half. Another was swarmed by missiles, each warhead detonating in a carefully timed sequence that overwhelmed its point defenses. "They're not used to this," Marcus's tactical officer said with growing confidence. "Their ships are built like ours were when we relied on shields. Thin hulls, no real armor." "Exploit it," Marcus ordered. "All ships target their engines and weapons. Cripple them, don't waste ammunition trying for kills." The battle was brutal and chaotic. Human ships took damage, their armor scorched and pitted by Zarathian return fire. But they kept fighting. When the destroyer EDF Warrior lost its main engines, it used maneuvering thrusters to continue engaging enemies. When the cruiser EDF Courage took a hit that vented 3 decks to space, damage control teams sealed the sections and the ship kept shooting. Admiral Craven watched the battle from his command ship, staying back with a small contingent of surviving Concordance vessels. He had witnessed hundreds of battles in his career, but nothing like this. Humans fought with a savagery he had never imagined. Ships charging into point-blank range where any hit could be fatal. "They are insane," one of his officers breathed. "No," Craven said slowly, understanding dawning. "They are warriors. True warriors, as we once were, before shields made us soft." The tide of battle began to turn. The Zarathians had numerical superiority, but they were confused by human tactics. Why were these ships not dying when hit? Why did they keep coming even when damaged? Where were the shield patterns they had learned to counter? Marcus coordinated the 3 human groups with precision, born of endless training. When one group drew enemy fire, another would strike from a different angle. They used the terrain, hiding behind asteroids and the planet's moon, popping out to fire before disappearing again. They deployed electronic warfare, jamming Zarathian sensors and communications. Sarah was aboard the Defiance in the science bay rather than the bridge. She monitored every hit the ship took, every impact on the armor, every system that failed and was brought back online by damage control. This was real-world testing of everything Earth Defense had built, and the data was invaluable. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported over the intercom. Sarah felt the ship shudder from another impact. Her screen showed the armor holding barely. She quickly calculated the rate of damage, the remaining armor integrity. They could take maybe 6 more hits like that before critical systems were exposed. On the bridge, Marcus saw the same data. "All ships pull back to secondary positions. We've bloodied them enough. Time for Phase 2. The human fleet disengaged, not fleeing but conducting an organized retreat to positions they had pre-planned. The Zarathians, seeing their enemies pull back, considered it a victory. They began to consolidate their forces. That was when the Concordance ships rejoined the battle. Admiral Craven had spent the last hour studying human tactics, learning, adapting. His ships had shields, but now they were using Sarah's frequency-shifting modifications. More importantly, they weren't relying on shields anymore. "All vessels," Craven commanded, his voice carrying the weight of decision, "engage at human-recommended distances. Use their tactics. Fight with honor, but fight to survive." The Concordance ships charged in, and while their armor was thinner than the human vessels, they made up for it with superior speed and firepower. Together, the combined fleet hit the Zarathians from multiple directions. Marcus's group went for the Zarathian flagship, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest human ship. "That's our target. If we take down their command ship, the rest might scatter. Might scatter, or might get more desperate," his tactical officer warned. "Either way, we learned something about them." Marcus targeted the flagship himself. All batteries focus fire on that ship's command section. The Defiance led the charge, absorbing hits meant to cripple it. Warning alarms shrieked as systems failed, but the ship kept moving forward. Other human vessels joined the assault, combining their fire. The Zarathian flagship tried to maneuver away, but it was designed for long-range combat, not the close-quarters brawl the humans forced upon it. Railgun slugs hammered its hull. Missiles found gaps in its armor. One of Earth's destroyers, the EDF Relentless, rammed into the flagship's engine section in a suicide run, crippling its propulsion. "They're launching boarding pods," the tactical officer reported. Marcus grinned. "Good, we actually know how to fight boarders. Let them come." Zarathian soldiers tried to board several human ships, expecting the shocked surrender that Concordance crews gave when boarded. Instead, they met Earth Defense Marines who had trained extensively for ship-to-ship combat. In the narrow corridors of human vessels, wearing heavy combat armor and wielding weapons designed for close quarters. The Marines were terrifying. The boarding parties were eliminated within minutes. Throughout the battle, human ships took losses. The destroyer EDF Thunder was destroyed when its reactor was hit. The cruiser EDF Justice lost 60 crew members to a hull breach. Every casualty hurt, every loss was mourned, but the survivors kept fighting. This was something the Zarathians didn't understand. Concordance forces would withdraw after taking significant damage, their doctrine built around preservation of resources. Human forces just got more determined. After 4 hours of continuous combat, the Zarathian fleet broke. Their flagship was crippled, a third of their vessels destroyed or disabled, and the enemy they expected to easily defeat was still fighting. The remaining Zarathian ships retreated into hyperspace. On the bridge of the Defiance, damaged and scorched but still operational, Marcus watched them go. Don't pursue. Let them run. We've got refugees to protect. The victory celebration was muted. Earth had won, but the cost was visible in damaged ships and casualty reports. They had lost 3 destroyers, 2 frigates, and over 400 personnel. It was the bloodiest combat humanity had seen in centuries, but they had won. Velthar came aboard the Defiance personally, his face streaked with tears. You saved my world. My people owe you a debt we can never repay. You can repay it by learning, Marcus said firmly, by remembering that technology is a tool, not a guarantee, by never forgetting how to fight when everything goes wrong. Admiral Craven was also present, studying the damage to the human ships with professional interest. Your casualties were significant. They were, Marcus agreed. Every one of them matters. But we knew going in that some of us wouldn't come home. That's the cost of fighting for real. Craven looked at him with newfound respect. You are warriors worthy of the title. Will you teach us? Will you help the Concordance remember what we have forgotten? Marcus looked at Sarah, who had joined them on the bridge. She nodded. 6 months after the Battle of Velthar Prime, the galaxy looked very different. The Zarathian advance had been stopped, pushed back system by system in brutal fighting. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The Concordance was learning to fight again. Sarah Chen walked through the new Concordance Tactical Academy on Earth, watching alien cadets practice maneuvers that would have seemed insane a year ago. A young Kynthian officer was explaining damage control procedures to her squad, showing them how to seal hull breaches and reroute systems when primary controls failed. It feels strange, Velthar said, walking beside Sarah. The ambassador had become a frequent visitor to Earth, helping coordinate the massive reformation of Concordance military doctrine, teaching our people to prepare for failure, when for so long we taught them that failure was impossible. Failure is always possible, Sarah replied, stopping to watch a simulation in progress. On the screen, alien cadets were responding to a shield failure scenario, their ship taking direct hits while they maneuvered for cover. The question is whether you prepare for it or let it destroy you. The reformation had not been easy. Many Concordance species struggled with the new approach. Entire fleets had to be redesigned. Ships that were little more than shield generators with engines attached needed to be retrofitted with armor, redundant systems, and diverse weapons arrays. It was expensive, time-consuming, and painful, but it was necessary. Marcus Webb, now Admiral Webb of both Earth Defense Force and Concordance Joint Command, stood in the shipyard orbiting Luna. Around him floated partially constructed vessels that represented a new philosophy. Concordance engineering combined with human tactical doctrine, ships with thick armor and powerful shields, with kinetic weapons and energy weapons with backup systems and battle damage plans. Admiral Craven joined him at the observation window. The Jakar warrior had become Marcus's closest ally in the Reformation efforts, using his considerable influence to push for changes that many resisted. The Council approved funding for 12 more academies, Craven reported. Your tactics are being taught across Concordance space. There is still resistance, but it grows weaker each day. It'll take a generation to fully change, Marcus said. Maybe 2, 3,000 years of habit doesn't disappear overnight. But it changes, and that is what matters. Craven gestured at the ships under construction. Already our new vessels perform better in combat. Casualty rates are down. Victory rates are up. The proof is in results. The Zarathian Dominion had not expected the Concordance to adapt so quickly. They had planned their invasion around the assumption that shield dependency was absolute. When human tactics spread throughout Concordance forces, the Zarathian advantage began to evaporate. The war continued for months, but the desperate retreat became a steady advance. Combined human Concordance fleets pushed the Zarathians back, liberating occupied worlds and destroying military infrastructure. Each battle taught both sides new lessons, but the Concordance learned faster because they had help from species who had never stopped learning. The final major battle took place at the Zarathian border fortress of Krathnok. It was the largest engagement of the war, with over 300 ships on each side. Marcus commanded the fleet from the new EDF Unity, a massive battleship built specifically to survive the kind of punishment modern warfare demanded. Sarah was aboard as well, now serving as Chief Science Officer for all Concordance defense forces. Her frequency-shifting shield technology had been refined and improved, creating shields that were resistant but not invulnerable. More importantly, she had helped design the backup systems that kept ships fighting even when shields failed. "Enemy fleet is in position," the tactical officer reported. "They're not running this time." "Good," Marcus said. "Neither are we." All ships engage at will. The battle was fierce and brutal. Both sides had learned from earlier engagements. The Zarathians used more sophisticated tactics, no longer relying solely on their counter-harmonic weapons. They employed electronic warfare, used terrain advantages, coordinated multi-vector assaults, but the Concordance had learned even more. They fought with determination and flexibility, adapting to enemy tactics in real time. When Zarathian forces tried to disable shields, Concordance ships simply shrugged off the hits with their armor. When Zarathians tried to board, they met trained soldiers ready for close combat. When Zarathians tried to outmaneuver, Concordance commanders used deceptive tactics that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Admiral Kraven led a daring strike against the fortress itself, taking a fleet of fast attack ships through a debris field that sensors said was impassable. Sarah's calculations had shown a narrow path through, and Kraven trusted human math more than Zarathian assumptions. The attack succeeded. The fortress fell. The Zarathian Dominion sued for peace within a week. The war was over. The treaty negotiations took place on Earth, in a neutral location chosen specifically for its symbolism. The species that had been called primitive and protected now hosted the conference that would reshape galactic politics. The Zarathian delegates were a surprise to many. They were not the monsters that propaganda had painted. They were people, much like any other species who had made strategic decisions based on flawed assumptions. Their leader, War Minister Zethra, was direct in his assessment. "We studied you for decades," he told the assembled Concordance leaders. "We knew your shield technology inside and out. We knew your ships, your tactics, your doctrine. We prepared for every contingency." He paused, looking at Marcus and Sarah. "Except for humanity. We did not account for a species that still knew how to fight without certainty of survival. That was our fatal error." The treaty was signed. The Zarathian Dominion would pay reparations, return occupied territory, and submit to inspections. In return, they would be allowed to join the Concordance as a member species, their military expertise welcomed once they proved they could be trusted. It was Sarah who suggested it during the negotiations. "They spent decades studying how to break our greatest strength. Imagine what they could accomplish if they studied how to support it instead." The suggestion was controversial, but ultimately accepted. The galaxy needed to change, and that meant including former enemies in the new order. The celebration on Earth was muted but genuine. Billions of lives had been lost in the war, both Concordance and Zarathian. The cost of complacency had been staggering, but the survivors were determined that the sacrifice would not be wasted. Sarah stood in the same observation deck where she had first watched alien ships arrive nearly 2 years ago. Felthar joined her, both of them looking out at the fleet of vessels from dozens of species, all bearing marks of recent combat. "We thought we were protecting you," Felthar said quietly, "sharing our shield technology, welcoming you to the safety of the Concordance. We were so certain we knew what was best." "You did help us," Sarah assured him, "just not in the way you expected. Your technology pushed our science forward decades. Your presence united Earth in a way nothing else could have, and your trust, even when we questioned everything, gave us the freedom to keep asking hard questions." We should have listened to those questions. Velthar replied. Your warnings about shield vulnerabilities. Marcus's concerns about tactical stagnation. We dismissed you because we thought age meant wisdom and youth meant ignorance. Sarah smiled. And now? Now I know that wisdom comes from many places. Sometimes from ancient experience. Sometimes from young eyes seeing problems we no longer notice. Velthar looked at her seriously. You saved us, Sarah, not just in battle but from ourselves. We had become so comfortable in our invulnerability that we forgot the first rule of survival, which is that nothing makes you truly invincible. That knowledge, that humility is what keeps you alive. Velthar gestured at the fleet. Every species out there now understands this. Because humanity taught us. Marcus found them later, carrying a bottle of actual champagne that someone had saved for the occasion. The three of them toasted in the observation deck, watching stars that no longer seemed quite so dangerous. What happens now? Marcus asked. We rebuild, Sarah said. Not just ships and stations, but our entire approach to defense. No more single points of failure. No more assumptions of invulnerability. The academies are just the beginning, Marcus added. We need to fundamentally change how the Concordance thinks about military preparedness. It'll take years, maybe decades. But we have time now, Velthar said. Thanks to you both, we have time to learn, to grow, to become what we should have been all along. Not invincible, but resilient. 6 months later, Sarah presented her latest research to the Concordance Science Council. This time, when she talked about theoretical vulnerabilities and potential failure points, the council listened carefully. They asked questions, challenged assumptions, explored possibilities. This was the real victory, Sarah thought. Not winning a war, but changing how an entire civilization thought about its own capabilities. Marcus spent his days training new Concordance officers, teaching them tactics that seemed basic to humans, but revolutionary to species who had forgotten them. He taught them to expect damage, to plan for losses, to keep fighting when everything went wrong.